Hi, and welcome to this week's Conversations with Pascale and Marléne. It's great to be back. And today we're going to be talking about relationships. And we're going to be speaking about what do you need in order to stay together in a relationship? And also, are you seeking permission to leave a relationship? I'm Marléne Rose Shaw. I'm a therapist and coach and self-help author. And I specialize in working with relationships and couples and helping people communicate well, be more assertive, set boundaries, and all the good stuff. And over to you, Pascale.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pascale Lane. I'm a therapeutic confidence and success coach, and I help successful coaches to have successful relationships.
That's great. I like that.
I know.
We want to have both, don't we? We want to have successful business and successful relationships. So it's lovely.
We do. Or not.
Or not.
As the case may be.
As the case may be. So I'm going to be talking about keeping a relationship together. You're going to be talking about needing permission to leave or whether to leave. What should we start with? Should we start with the staying together?
Yeah, let's start with staying together.
Staying together. So what do we need? What do we need to stay together? You know, what are those sort of components that need to happen? What do you think?
Well, actually, funnily enough, I was talking about this yesterday. So we're both relationship therapists, right? So we have seen many different people sitting in front of us, all the different types of relationships and what have you. I personally don't like to get too prescriptive about what a relationship should or shouldn't have, because I think everybody floats their boat differently. There are two prerequisites for me about what makes a good relationship or a healthy relationship. And that is that both people are happy and both people feel they are respected. And really and truthfully, anything outside of that is great, but won't necessarily be for everyone. But I think to both feel happy with the relationship and both feel respected within the relationship is essential.
Because every couple is different, every relationship is different, isn't it? And people have their own understanding of what makes a relationship and what makes them happy.
And people go through different seasons, like the relationship goes through different seasons. So what we needed back, 5-10 years ago isn't necessarily what we need now.
The respect thing is very interesting. It's something I bring up with couples a lot, because it's not that they mean to disrespect each other. They've just got into bad habits and bad patterns. And it's when we bring up the subject of what actually is respect in your relationship, and they just haven't thought about it. And when they start to think about it, it's something clicks, and they make big changes. For me, what do you need to stay together is, it comes fundamentally, I think it comes down to a commitment to the relationship. When couples come into therapy together as a couple, it's not unusual for one person to very much want the relationship to continue and the other person to not be sure. And it's quite important, I think, for us to get to a point of understanding, well, what do you actually want? And, are you making a commitment to this process of therapy and being in the relationship? Because if somebody's sort of, well, I think I'll come along, but I'm not sure. Well, I'll sort of pretend I don't want to because that protects me. And, there's all of that going on. It's, we need to explore that and get underneath that because otherwise, until we have that commitment to the relationship that, yes, I want to work on my relationship, I want to go through the process of therapy, and I want to, actually stay with this person as best as I can. And I want to make sure, I want to explore all the options and make sure we can't move forward. So it's about that. And there's the other thing that I find is that I don't know what your experience is, Pascale, but sometimes when there's been a betrayal of some sort, or some wrongdoing, or something, and one partner is greatly hurt, betrayed, and we need to work on that. We need to help them process that and acknowledge their pain and so forth. But there's a kind of holding on to it, almost like holding it over the other person. And at some point, if a relationship, to stay together, at some point, that betrayed person has to make the decision that they're going to put it in the past. They're going to move forward. They're going to forgive, or maybe not accept fully, but they're going to forgive that what's happened has happened. And now they're focused on moving forward in the relationship instead of holding on to it and keeping it as some sort of something in the relationship that they use to almost to protect themselves. What's your experience of that?
So what that makes me consider is when they are, I'm try and get my words out so that this isn't too confusing. I think it depends on whether they are the person in strength, whether they're the person who's got the power. That's a horrible word to use, but you know what I mean. Or whether they are the person that's begging for the relationship to work. As to how that flips, because yes, so many times you see people where, like, from our point of view, we're like, yeah, you just, sorry, this sounds a bit unsympathetic. I'm not unsympathetic at all. But it's just like, you need to be able to draw the line, yes, and move on. Otherwise, you're not going to move on. You're moving on with one foot forward, but you've got your other foot planted in the past. And until you bring both of those feet forward, you can't actually move on. But it depends whether that person is the person that has the strength, and wants the relationship to work, or whether they are the person that is begging for the relationship to work. And I think that is an energetic thing that is really, really, really important, because, like, is it always going to be chucked back out in an argument in anger or in vengeance? Is it always going to be the card, a horrible use of language here, very emotive, not intentionally at all, but the card that is pulled when they are feeling like, woe's me? And I think ultimately, when we have a betrayal, and like, my mind goes to infidelity, because I think that's the usual one that comes up. But of course, it's not always infidelity. There are loads of ways that we betray each other in relationships all the time. And I think there does need to get to a point where you're like, you're absolutely right. We either move on now. And it's always very hard as a therapist. And I remember the group discussion when I was in training about this. Like, you can't, as therapists, we can't tell our clients like you gotta draw the line and you've got to move on. But of course, therapeutically, we're moving them to the point where, because you can't in inverted commas, you can't have a healthy relationship if there is still an element of resentment in the relationship. I don't believe you can have a healthy relationship if there's any resentment, really. Not long term. But it is an important factor of whether or not I hold the cards or whether you hold the cards, or whether or not we're in equal balance. Because also, like, if there has been a betrayal, then we would expect the person who has done the betrayal to be very sympathetic and kind of give their partner as much time and as many answers and as, you know, as much space as they need to work through it. But there comes a point, we're all human. There comes a point where you're like, you can't keep beating me with this stick all the time.
It's,
you know, it's hard. I think it's really hard.
It's very hard. And as a therapist, you know, it's very important to make sure the person who's been betrayed really is heard and acknowledged and sympathized with and given kindness and all of that. But from a conscious kindness point of view, you know, I often talk about conscious kindness, the bigger picture kindness. There comes a point where it's important that they understand that if they are to stay together in this relationship as a healthy relationship, they have to say, that's done. I'm not holding on to it and using it anymore as a stick to beat this other person. And there's a lot of work involved in that to do that. The other thing, you know, to answer what do you need to stay together, I think is the courage to be vulnerable in communication, particularly the courage to say, this is what I'm feeling. I'm taking my guard down, you know, because quite often people have put a guard up over time, haven't they? And to you know as well as I do, that it's a wonderful thing when a couple, both people in a couple will say, I'm feeling hurt, feeling rejected, feel humiliated, I feel, and the other person says, I feel hurt, I feel rejected, but not in an argumentative way, but just in them both acknowledging that they're both feeling those vulnerable feelings and actually feeling able to do that with each other without fear. It immediately connects them. It immediately connects them. And I think if we can be vulnerable, if we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable in our relationships, then, and by that I mean really declare our true feelings, not the filtered feelings, but not the lost in translation feelings, but the heart, what's going on inside. I think we have such a strong connection with another person then. Of course, if they're then abusing that, then we know that that's not the relationship to continue with. But the majority of time, when we show our vulnerability, the other person does too. So I think that's another aspect. There's so many things to staying together, aren't there?
Oh, I mean, so many things, but that actually that lends itself to. I know it's different, but that lends itself to respect.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The power of vulnerability it's very powerful. So, and as I said, if somebody is disrespecting that, if they are stamping on your vulnerability, then obviously it's not a good idea to continue. And you were going to talk a little bit about that, weren't you? About, you know, do people seek permission to leave a relationship? Do they feel they have to do that? What's your experience of that?
Yeah, so I was reflecting on this the other day, and you know we've spoken about it a little bit, just about how, and I come at this from my perspective. I come at this from the female point of view, as a female, and as somebody who works pretty much exclusively with females. The amount of clients that I've worked with over the years who have been looking for permission to leave a relationship. So where the relationship has been unhappy for such a long time, but and I talk about self-worth all the time. I love me a bit of self-worth. Where it doesn't feel awful enough to leave. Like there's no kind of big event that is just like, right, that's it, I'm out of here. Betrayal, like we were just talking about. But they feel so desperately unhappy. And probably there's children involved. Probably there's a financial element. And it would be easier to stay, but they're fucking miserable. And I just think, and I have no agenda when it comes to what my clients do. I have no agenda at all in whether or not people stay together or leave. But I do have a massive agenda in women, because that's my client base, being happy and not settling for a life that is mediocre because they think it's the right thing to do. And so that permission seeking for me, very much in my experience, is around, what do you need in order to make peace with leaving this relationship? And very often my clients have said to me, I just need to know that I've done everything that I can in order to make it work. And when I know that I've done everything that I can to make it work and it still doesn't work, then I will feel okay leaving. But I need that permission. I need to know that I've done everything that I can. And I honestly, Marléne, I absolutely love that, because I am not a believer, regardless of whether children are involved or not, I am not a believer in two people staying together unhappy for the sake of it. I just don't. I don't believe it's right for them. I definitely don't believe it's right for the children. And I just think life's too bloody short. Like, life's too short. Like, just don't do it. Unless you want to do it, in which case do it.
Yeah, it's a waste of
free
time.
Choice.
It's a waste of life, isn't it? Waste of time.
It
if
is.
you stay in any unhappy situation, it's a waste of time. And sometimes couples come to me and they, they probably are going to split up, but they come for couples therapy because they want to give it the best shot they can. And actually, through the process of couples therapy, they're fine. They get back together and everything's fine. But sometimes, occasionally, not often, but occasionally, they do choose to end the relationship. And for me, that's about helping them end the relationship in the very best way they can. It's about saying, okay, we haven't got this type of relationship anymore, but we can, particularly if there's children involved, we can have a different type of relationship. We can have we can be friends, we can have respect, sometimes they've got businesses together, they're co-parenting, there's various different things. And I always say to people that even if you went to opposite ends of the earth and never saw each other again, you'd still have a relationship in your heads about how you were when you ended with each other. So you want that to be as positive as possible, so you don't spend the rest of your lives looking back on this with this memory of this negative time. So I think it's important to, as you say, to end a relationship if it's not working, but to do it really well, not just sort of say, right, that's it, I'm off.
Yep.
Do you think women are different about endings than men, in your experience? Do you think women hold on to relationships for longer, or men do, or makes no difference?
The men that I've worked with, I don't think there's that much difference, if I'm honest. I don't. I mean, I know, like, there's this kind of like stereotypical man, stereotypical woman. In my experience, not at all. The men that I've worked with have been fathers who love their children, who are committed to family life, who, by virtue of, well, not by virtue of the fact that we work together, but by virtue of the fact that we work together, have come from difficult family backgrounds themselves, and want things to be different, and feel devastated when they're not. You know, I know how much my parents' divorce affected my dad. So I don't think that I wouldn't like to have like a statistical guess on what percentage of men are, but in my experience with the men that I've worked with, I think everybody feels the same feels. Definitely. Would you agree?
I know working with men in general that it's never the same as this sort of stereotypical idea of men. There is also this sort of idea that women cling on to relationships and don't want to walk away from relationships. But actually, in my experience, there is no sort of male-female difference. People are people.
People are people. I think it's far more individual.
Yeah.
Than and also, like, you know, just talking about betrayal and just thinking about a couple of the women that I've worked with over the years, and I'm saying this with a smile on my face, and I don't mean it. I'm not being awful, or I am being awful, but there's this kind of like stereotype that it's always the men that have the affairs. But actually, the amount of women that I worked with, especially over lockdown, that were having like affairs, I was I was quite surprised, if I'm honest, because I worked with a lot of women that had affairs over over the past kind of like 5, 6, 7 years. You know, and there is a stereotype that it's always the men, but in my experience, it's not.
What point do you think then? Is there a point where people know that it's time to end?
Oh, God, what a question. I would say yes. I would say, do you know what? This reminds me, I'm going to digress and I'll come back to it. I saw this great little reel. I think I saved it actually, because I thought I'm going to use that at some point. A great reel where the guy is saying, a woman, he doesn't say it like this, he says it much more poetic than this. But he says, you know, like, when a woman gives up, when a woman has said enough is enough, you are only seeing like the tip of the iceberg. But actually, at the point where she says, that's it, enough, she has had years of feeling unheard, years of feeling unseen, years of feeling disrespected or invisible, or, like I said, he says it much nicer than this. At the point then where she snaps and she's like, that's it, I'm done, there's no going back then. She has had years to get to this point. So is there a point? I think at the point where the woman checks out of the relationship emotionally, hasn't checked out, we're still seeking that permission to leave, still hasn't got to the point where she's ready to kind of like pack her suitcase, you know, you know what I mean. But at the point that she's checked out of the relationship, I think it's difficult for most women to go back from that point.
Yes, I agree. I'm going quiet, and I'll share with our audience. I'm going quiet because I've just lived here for a couple of weeks and the view of the sea is so beautiful. I just looked up and it just pulled me.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? I did a
That's
driving to school with the
fine.
girls yesterday. You were talking when we were on the phone the other day about the diamonds in the sea, and
I
I said to the girls, look now, because it was really flat, the sea,
mhm,
when we were driving to school the other day. I was like, look at the sea, girls, look at it, look at the
mhm.
diamonds. Let's wrap it up there as a
Yeah,
beautiful, beautiful place to
yeah, let's do that.
stop.
Okay.
I know I could go on for hours on this topic, but we won't.
Let's just
Um,
say that if there's anybody there who's unsure about whether they should I stay or should I go, to get in touch, because that's also another part of therapy, isn't it? Helping people to get clarity
helping
and
people to figure it out.
helping them
Yeah.
figure it out. Mhm.
And I think we can't always, it's not about seeking permission, but we all need, and I mean all need, um, a neutral perspective to help us figure stuff out.
Yeah,
We all need it
yeah.
100%. And that's what you and I are here for. So get in touch with either of us. I will put the call booking links for us both, Marléne, in the comments under the video, or feel free to drop us a DM if that's, if that's easier. And I hope it's been helpful. It was a
Yeah.
great conversation.
Okay. Bye bye for